Good evening, everyone. I want to call the Novi Library Board meeting to order Thursday, October 27th. Welcome, everyone. And I would ask that you all join me in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. Mr. Secretary, would you please call the roll?
Trustee Crawford?
Here.
Trustee Dooley?
Here.
Trustee Garamurti is absent excused. Trustee Mitchner?
Present, thank you.
Trustee Stirring?
Present.
Trustee Bartlett is president. Trustee Chair Curry is caught in traffic.
Okay.
And then Student Representative Carcarla?
Here.
And Student Representative Salim is absent.
Okay, thank you. We'll move on to the approval of the agenda. Are there any corrections or additions to the agenda?
I just needed a quick clarification for
Okay.
tonight. I just wanted to triple check. Last month, we had a motion to table the collections policy, and I think we put the verbiage for October. Do we have to amend the agenda to bring it back under matters for board action this month?
If you want to do that,
Because
you're going to have to do a motion at particular time for an action
correct,
tonight.
but I was wondering if we had to bring it back, in which case I would amend the agenda.
We didn't say how it was going to be brought back, so we are actually, by speaking about it, we are
Yeah.
bringing it back.
I just wanted to be, I just
There you
wanted
go.
to be clear.
Yeah,
so.
and I'm going to talk about it too.
Are you?
in the
Okay.
presence report, so
Okay.
Yeah, and we're,
Here last month.
Yeah.
However, if it was tabled, then once it's on your agenda, either by motion or
Yeah.
your next agenda,
Okay.
then you're going to need a motion and support to take it from the table and a vote. So,
Oh, to take it from the table?
Yes.
Even though we said October last month?
even though, but it's been tabled, so it has to be removed from the table.
Got it. Okay. In that case, could we, I mean, we're gonna end up tabling it again, actually, probably, but we.
Then you could do nothing tonight.
Okay.
It will remain on the table
Well, how
until
about,
it's brought back.
okay, how about
properly.
we bring it back, though, and then just have it on the agenda for tonight, and then if we have to table it again, we'll table it again.
well,
Does that make sense?
I don't think we need to put it on, we don't
We
need
don't
to
have
put it on the
to?
agenda.
Oh, we don't?
No.
Okay.
Is it-
Okay, okay.
Yeah, we're good.
I just want to be sure of procedure, that's all.
Member Mister.
Yeah, I have a question. So what I'm trying to clarify from what Trustee Dooley, Vice President Dooley is saying, are you asking for discussion purposes if it needs to be put back in? Or are you asking if we want to potentially vote on it, does it need to be put back in?
Oh, yeah, thank you for that
Yeah.
question. I think I was just
'Cause
worried
it's not
about,
under the matters.
right, I was just worried about how we verbalized the tabled motion last month. I was worried that we had to bring it back this month. That's what my worry was. But I guess we don't have to because we can still have discussion in other parts.
We did get clarification from the city attorney
Yeah.
prior to the meeting too. We talked to them about that, so I think we're
We're good?
good.
Yeah, and I was just gonna say, like, we're good if we're just discussing. If
Yeah.
you want it back for a vote, then it's not for a vote yet.
I
So
do want it for discussion.
Only discussion.
Yeah, so I
Okay.
guess we can wait till next month then.
Okay.
And that's how I understood the direction, which is why
Okay.
it wasn't brought back on matters for board action.
Okay.
Okay, got it. Thank
Okay,
you.
okay.
I just needed to reaffirm that. Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Okay, the agenda, are there anything else about the agenda? Okay, seeing no additions, then I'll call for a roll.
We need a motion
Oh, we need a motion.
I'll motion.
Motion to approve the
See, I
agenda.
was gone
Second.
crazy.
Okay.
I was gone crazy. Okay, have a motion and
To
a
approve the
second?
agenda.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion about the agenda? No? All right, now, please call the roll.
Trustee Dooley?
Yes.
Trustee Mitchner?
Yes.
Trustee Stirring?
Yes.
Trustee Bartlett votes yes. Trustee Crawford?
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0.
Okay, and there are two items on the consent agenda. And is there three? No, there's two. Two items on the consent agenda, and are there any additions or corrections with that?
I'll move to approve the consent agenda.
Okay, we have a motion and
I'll
a
second.
second from this side of the table.
I'll second.
Okay. Motion and a second. Discussion? Seeing none? Please
Trust-
call the roll.
Trustee Mitchner?
Yes.
Trustee Sturring?
Yes.
Trustee Bartlett votes yes. Trustee Crawford?
Yes.
Trustee Dooley?
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0.
Okay, and we don't have any presentations this month, so we'll have our first public comment. In order to hear all citizen comments at a reasonable hour, the library board requests that speakers respect the 3-minute time limit. This is not a question-and-answer session. However, it's an opportunity to voice your thoughts with the library board. Citizens must state their first, last name, and address.
Hi, I'm Sharon Trumpy, Novi resident. Oh, back
Yeah.
on, much louder all of a sudden.
Keep it close.
Okay,
Yeah,
I'm gonna
that's good.
scooch it forward, I'm not that tall. I'm really glad that you have the collections policy up for discussion tonight. And on that, I wanted to echo Mr. Chair Curry's comments that the collection policy is perhaps one of your most important policies and decisions. And I think that you have already made a lot of decisions as a board that should guide that decision. So I was looking at the strategic objectives that were approved for 2019 to 2022, and number 2 is escalate an innovative and inclusive culture. And that's one of the things I really want to see reflected in all of our library policies, including the collections policy. I also see on here barrier-free policies and procedures, library access to all Novi residents, city employees, businesses working in Novi, introduce unique collections. So I think one of the main roles of a library is to make information available to people and for people to have equitable access to that information, whether it's a topic that I want to read about or not. I'm a voracious reader. I haven't read all the books in the library. I'm sure there's a lot of books in the library I'd have no interest in, but I'm sure glad they're there because I know they're of interest to other people, and I want that to continue. I also see that your motto is inform, inspire, include. Your mission is NPL provides the resources, programs to support the educational, cultural, informational, recreational needs of its diverse community. And your value statement says NPL supports intellectual freedom and access to informational resources for all while maintaining the privacy of its patrons and providing a safe and secure environment. And those are the things that I hope that you will keep in mind as you have this discussion tonight to ensure that our collections are accessible to everyone and that everyone feels welcome and safe in our library. And that although I do agree that the library and its board serve the citizens of Novi, as Mr. Chair Curry said, I do not agree that that's the only or the top responsibility. The top responsibility in my eyes of a library is to respect the First Amendment and to make sure that voices can be heard and that they be accessible to everyone in the community, whether they not want to avail themselves of those resources or not. So I look forward to the discussion tonight. Thank you.
Okay, anyone else? All right, seeing no further comments, we'll move on with reports, and we're happy to see our students here. Is my time up? Okay. Didn't know you were gonna time me too, I know. Okay, student reports.
So I'll start off the September library report, starting off with the tween and teen library programs. The Making Crafts for Hispanic Heritage Month was held on September 17th, where children of ages 6 to 12 enjoyed making Spanish flowers, face painting, and other cultural crafts. There were 28 people in attendance. The Drum Unity Rhythmic Fun for Everyone program was held on September 20th, and this program was recommended for grades K through 8 with family. Guests also got into the groove with this high-energy, interactive, fun music program held by Lori Fittian of Drum Unity. Guests learned how to drum and make music with friends at the library, and there were 56 people in attendance. The Tail Wagging Reading Buddies program was held on September 28th, and it was an opportunity to provide a comfortable, non-judgmental space for a child and their family to read to a therapy dog, and this encouraged the children's reading skills, confidence, and their love for reading. There were 28 people in attendance. Moving on to the Teen Space update. Teen Space started along with the school year on September 12th, and during September, there were 208 students who visited Teen Space.
For our Teen Advisory Board update, the first TAB meeting of the 2022-2023 school year was held on September 30th. The meeting started with a welcome and an icebreaker to help people to get to know each other. The teens decorated name cards to be placed at their seats to help learn guest names. The TAB president led the meeting with a presentation overview of TAB. The teens discussed what they hope to get out of TABs in the coming school year. An overview and recap of the library summer reading program was shared, and feedback about how to improve next year's teen program was discussed. Finally, the meeting ended with an update about the Teen Stop renovations project and sharing ideas for a new name for the space. The attendance for this TAB meeting was 8 people. For our upcoming programs, on November 5th, we have a Korean lantern making program, and on November 16th, we have tail wagging reading buggies. For our Teen Stop featured display, you can see that the September Teen Stop display recognized Banned Books Week, which was held from September 18th through 24th. And that's all for our report.
Okay, thank you very much. Does anybody have any questions or comments for our teen report?
Just fantastic job, and that was well articulated too, like very succinct, to the point, but informative.
And
How
just,
was it?
Go ahead.
The drumming thing, I was really interested in how, this is the first time that program has taken place? This is the
we've
first
had them
time
in the
doing
past.
drumming?
We have had them in the past.
Oh, okay. But that sounded really interesting, as well as every time the Historical Commission is doing a program, the tail wagging and the story reading with pets is going on at the same time, and it always draws a crowd of other people that just want to know what's going on in that part of the room. They want to hear about it. So I don't know if that's the same program or if it's an extension of that program, if it's the same thing.
They're both different.
They're both different?
Yes.
Okay, okay.
Yes.
Anything with pets and kids, though, I think is
Yes.
awesome, so. I like it.
And just to add, we welcomed back Yolanda Hockaday-Dennis, who is our teen space monitor, and she's been doing a great job getting to know the kids and welcoming them back to the space. As you can see, just over 200 students have dropped in just in the first month, which we didn't get started until the middle of the month, so it was great.
Okay, well, thank you very much. Always great to hear all the exciting things that are going on in teen space, so. All right, moving ahead then with the president's report, we have a special report, actually, by Trustee Mitchner, who asked to speak a little bit to us about the New Jersey Library Virtual Trustee something.
Institute. So I'll make this brief. So I was able to keynote this month in October for the New Jersey Library Virtual Trustee Institute. They saw my presentation at PLA and they liked it. So they asked me to take that opportunity to talk about library policies and what they called EDI as opposed to DEI. I was mentioning that to Julie. I'm like, they put equity first, which is interesting. So I'll just tell you a little bit about what I talked about. It was a great program. It is live. You can find it online now. It became live today. So it is something that you can find for yourself. But I'll just give you a little bit of a nutshell about what I talked about. It might be helpful. So obviously, I'm not going to give you everything. But I just talked about how policies are really important in the library because it shapes our future. And when we think about books, who do we think about first? I usually think about like story times. I think about books as something that was special to me growing up. Books make memories. Books help us to build, to grow, to learn, to be educated, but they also soothe us. You know, I am the therapist, so they also soothe us and give us some comfort. So a lot of people are drawn to our library. They have different interests for many reasons. And for all those reasons, and maybe none that I mentioned, but other ones, right? But it basically, it's a future thing. I remember a while back, there was question marks about, will libraries still be relevant because internet is taking over. I'm sure you all remember those conversations. Like, well, do we still need books? Do we still need libraries? Can't we just go online and find everything? I think we've learned, no, the library, as Julie likes to put it, is the center of our community. It's really important. But every community needs some kind of a rule, right? We have to have structure. So policies are important because without policies, we don't know what we're supposed to be doing. We could walk into each other and say, well, that's okay. We could hit each other. We could hurt each other. There's things that could go wrong. So policies are created for structure, direction, safety, and also to set a precedent. That's really important. But we have to think about it also that historically, when rules have been created, sometimes those rules have been created to safeguard or to gatekeep. So we always want to have a really good understanding of what our policies are. So if we need to revise or eliminate things that aren't relevant anymore. Now you have to understand, my grandmother was born in 1922. She is no longer here, but she's the one that loved it. She was a teacher, y'all. Yay, teachers. She took me to all the libraries that she could in Michigan. But think about when she was born, there was actually a library conference held in Detroit about race and libraries and access. And she wasn't able to go to some of those libraries. Even though we're not the South, we weren't as segregated, there still was some restrictions for some people. Literacy is a gateway to the future. It opens up doors, it opens up avenues, and now she became an educator before she passed on, right? And then she educated me. That's why that was important to her. Now, there might have been rules on the books that say different things about who could come in. There were rules on policies that some libraries had that, well, for certain groups of people, maybe there's a reading table, and people that maybe look like me could come in on Tuesdays and Fridays and go to that reading table, grab my books, and go. Libraries are supposed to be free and accessible places to all, but that's not always how it's been, unfortunately. So sometimes we have to just look over our policies and make sure there's still not that type of energy in our policies, because it might not say that, but it might still have that energy if we're not reviewing what we have. So it's really important to kind of notice who's being served, who might not be served when we look at policies. How does DEI tie into policy work? A policy could be that flip-flop, we talked about the flip-flop shoes, Some cultures feel like it's really important to be able to wear shoes that don't feel like shoes that you would wear outside. We have to respect that to a degree. If we can't, what can we do to accommodate? We have to kind of make sure that the people making decisions at the table don't all look exactly alike and come from the same energy, background, understanding, culture, so that we're considering our whole community when we're considering policies. Otherwise, even sometimes unbeknownst to us, we can X people out. Even in our recent policy meeting, we had great discussions, and I really appreciate you coming back and saying, Ashley, Tara, these are okay. There were some policies we talked about, and I mentioned some things, and then Julie went and did some research and came back and said, Ashley, that is a good idea, and that was with an accessibility issue with the signs and what they say, disabled or other words that people have used in the past. So things change. At one point, certain words were the way that you say things, right? Being a Black woman, I can say this and it won't, be bad, right? At one point, we were called colored, and that was a respectful way. My grandmother in 1922, that's the way you talk to her. So a policy could even say that, right? Today, that would not be okay at all. Don't say that. So it's just really important to make sure that you're updating things. It's the same reason why we update our closets, we update our clothes and things like that. So just making sure that we know what's going on. We always want to think about intention versus impact. So consider the goal of the policy. Who do you envision when you write it? And I mean that. Do you think about that kid that's always smacking their gum loud and rude and doesn't say hi back to you? No gum chewing in the library, Do we do that? Or do we think about that cute little kid that just can't reach the water fountain? Maybe we can think of a policy that's more accommodating so that kid can get the water. Or we can just think about that kid and the gum smacking kid and everybody. Think about several people when we're doing policy work. Maybe people that don't look like us or think like us or have the abilities that we do. Is your policy committee diverse, equitable, and inclusive? That's something to think about. Is your board culturally competent? And that's not just looking at us. That's more so, that's a part of it. Diversity is important in makeup, but also, experiences, ways of thinking. Those things are important too. How are we being treated? Do they have say? That's important too, not just are they there? I had a conversation with a lady that I had recently met, and she was telling me, she lives in Troy, and she was telling me a group that she belongs to is very diverse. And I was like, oh, that's great. And I said, so you have leadership there? She's like, that's diverse? And she's like, well, no, they're not leaders. And I said, oh, well, tell me more. And she mentioned, well, there's a lot of people from different cultures there. And I said, well, are they decision makers too? And she's like, well, no, mostly, she said, mostly the white people are the decision makers, her words. But I think where that's okay, I think it's important when we think about diversity, equity, and inclusion and policies, we want to make sure that there's more than one type of group making decisions too, because that helps a lot, right? If I'm making a rule for Julie, I need to really think about what does Julie need, because we're here to serve. So that's just something that's important. And looking for feedback, looking for people that come and share their opinions and their thoughts. They give us thoughts that maybe didn't occur to us. Exceptions to the rules. And just this once mindset can be dangerous in some circumstances, because for some people we might be like, oh, I love that person. Yeah, just for you, absolutely. But somebody else might come and we think, no, we just can't do that. So you have to make sure that procedurally you're following through as well. Otherwise you can have some hot water on your hands. Thinking about policies that punish patrons for being who they are. We've talked a lot in DEI about belonging. If we have a culture of belonging, that means that I'm not punishing you for wearing braids in your hair, you know, or deciding to wear different colors in our hair, right? Like, that's okay for us to do those things if that's what we choose to do. The Crown Act is a great example. If you're not familiar with it, I encourage you to look it up, because that was a policy that was created because Black women for many years were not allowed to wear their hair the way they wanted to professionally. So I became a professional at 18. I worked at a newspaper, so I couldn't do my hair like this, and now I can. The Crown Act passed last year. So it's you know, these things, you probably wouldn't even think about that, you know, if braids are not something you thought about wearing, right? So that's having those different discussions, having different people at your table to have these conversations. And then thinking about, can your policy be evenly applied? That's really important. It is important to consider culture and not just the policy committee's experience. Are teens being targeted? You know, teens have a lot of stereotypes that aren't fair. I went to a trustee roundtable and someone from another library in Michigan said that they close their doors when the high school lets out because the teens are loud. They didn't want them in. And that made me feel sad for those teens because I know they need teen space to be able to feel like they belong, to feel like they are wanted and welcomed. And if we're restricting literacy from them, then what does that do? What does that do when we don't have the opportunity to grow here in a library system? What else are they going to turn to? It's really a barrier that just can't be, right? So assumptions being made are dangerous, challenging that no one in our community would think that way. We don't know what people think if we are not in that community. We don't know what people have said. So when people say, I feel like, or, you know, someone said this to me, oh, I'm sure they didn't say that to you. No. Just listen, give them your ears. Because maybe we haven't heard it, but maybe they're not as respected as we might be, right? People treat different people different ways. So those are some thoughts. That was a quick nutshell, y'all. I tried to make it brief, but just to give you an understanding of what I was able to speak about at the Institute. They did invite me back again. They want me to speak in January. They've already paid me. So I'll be speaking on this topic again in a bigger forum. But I'm doing a lot of work in this area. I'm doing a lot of research. It's so important because books are really, what my grandmother taught me, books are really the key to the future. And as was mentioned earlier, being a voracious reader is important, and it's also fun. So there's that.
So, well, thank you.
Yes.
If someone wanted to watch it live, you said now it's on live.
It is.
How would somebody connect with your workshop?
Yeah, so I will have, I will get it to Julie if that's okay, and we can have it put in the packet for next month. That way you can see it, but the community, the public can see it too if they like. Does that sound good?
In terms of it.
Just the link.
Oh, the link.
Just the link.
Absolutely.
It's just a link.
Yep,
It is free. Yeah.
I'm curious, it was called the Virtual Trustee Institute. Can you expand on what the virtual part was?
Yeah,
I mean, was it like not people all together, or?
No, we were all together online. You remember that Zoom thing? Yeah, so we were online. So there were I had two counter speakers that one of them was from San Diego, one of them was from Maryland. So people were from all over the globe at this institute. It was the morning of the parent camp. Y'all don't quote me on the date. Whenever the parent camp was, that's when this took place. But I was able to give examples of things that I've seen, how I've been able to be instrumental, being who I am on this board. I'm the only Black person that's ever been on this board. I think about that. You may not think about that, but I realize that which is okay. But I realize that it's important because I bring a different wealth and experience here from that culture that may not be thought about right away. So we might have a conversation about like hair is an example I just gave is a really good one. We've had conversations before when Kat and Julie were on policy about safety and what threats look like to maybe a Black teenager versus someone else when it comes to even things like law enforcement and being fearful. So just understanding culture and like how do we enforce policies? How are we fair when we do that? You know, are teens loud sometimes, just like us? You know, so those are things that stand out.
Okay, anyone? Oh, Srini snuck in. I didn't see you sneaking in. Were you like bending down or something when you were coming up here? I didn't see you. Yeah, okay. Okay, so anybody else have any questions or comments? Okay, it's good. Spread the word. And I'm sure you tell people when you are speaking that you're from Novi Library Board, right? Correct?
I don't think I mentioned this library specifically. I talked about my library, but it's okay. You guys are amazing.
Okay, well, I'm going to put in a plug for
I think it's in
mentioning Novi
there.
Library.
I have to look now. I don't want to lie to you. I have to
Okay,
look.
we're going to make sure we look at that live present, or
You
that
should.
online presentation. We'll make sure.
Find a t-shirt for Tara that says Novi.
I've got one. I was lucky enough to have a polo with Novi Public Library on it.
Okay, so moving along then, the other thing I wanted to mention is that I want to remind everyone that last month we had a robust discussion, I thought, on both the policies that came forward, but particularly about relating to the library's collection policy. And there were lingering questions from board members. So a motion was made at that September meeting to table draft 1 of the collection development policy until the October meeting, and that was the motion that was made, and it was passed. So the draft was discussed in the recent DEI committee also. However, the DEI committee did not make a recommendation to the board, nor did they anticipate doing that, I don't think, make a recommendation to the board, and Chair Dooley is going to discuss further the conversation that took place in her committee. So I'm sure you all know that policies relating to library censorship and intellectual freedom is getting considerable attention. Not all good these days, and nationally as well as locally. So our board needs to be very sure that we have fully discussed our policy and any changes that are proposed. I know that the policy committee, the staff committee also is still discussing this policy as well. So since our board, I think, is very active, I know is very active in the community and represents a large cross-section of this community, we need to make sure, I think, about all policies, we need to make sure that all questions are discussed and answered, because this discussion is what community members also want to ask. You know, what you are asking and the kind of things, there are at least 10 or 15 other people out in the community that are asking the same thing. So my personal recommendation actually would be for board members to hear what the DEI committee discussion was all about. And inasmuch as this is draft 1, it would be appropriate for both policy and DEI committees to discuss further this next month and maybe continue on. I mean, there's no time frame that's absolutely, in cement here. I mean, we don't have to worry about that. I want to get all the questions answered and all the discussion out there. I think we all want that. So I would ask that both policy and DEI committees discuss further and then come back to the board at a time that's appropriate. And if it's November, good. If it's December, that's okay too. That's okay too. But we'd like to get this policy. There is a policy in place, so it's not like we don't have anything in place currently, but we're looking at the changes. So I would like to know their recommendations on draft 1, and I think the board will feel better prepared to vote if we get all of this discussion to take place. So of course, someone here may decide that you've heard enough tonight and you want to make a motion for action, that if that's, I hope that's not the case, but if it is, have at it, I guess, is what I'll say. You can bring a motion to the floor at any time. I mean, that's something you can do, but I would always hope that we have a chance to think about it. The board has a chance to be notified before you would make any kind of motion of that sort. So that's all in my president's report, and we'll hear more about it, about the discussion when Chair Dooley talks about her committee. And if it was in policy as well, then we'd like to know that too. So moving right along, just in time for the, I'm sorry.
It's okay.
Trustee Missioner.
So I don't know if you mean the staff policy got it? We did not get it. This was not referred to us.
No, staff. Yes.
So we should also, as a policy
Yes.
committee, get this as well, and it hasn't been forwarded to us.
We agree.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. We're good?
Yep.
All right. Okay. Treasurer's report. Trustee Chiracuri.
Okay, so, I guess looking at big numbers that change, when I recently told Julie to go, shake down the treasurer for some money, it looks like you, suddenly got $3 million, all right? So, wow. But, yeah, I mean, so, that's why you see the big jump there, is obviously taxes coming once a year. Otherwise, spending seems to be moving roughly according to plan. Yeah, nothing extraordinary, I think that's kind of done, so.
Okay. Any questions? All right then. Moving right along, we'll go to the director's report. Director Farkas.
Thank you. I'll start on page 31. Just at the top, want to recognize years of service for November. We have Betty Lang, Information Services, 34 years. Bill Bebenek, Facilities, 22 years. Myself, I can't believe it, 15 years coming up in November.
You should
Wow.
have gray hair.
I know, right? Thank God for Clairol. No, Lisa Wrinkle, Support Services, 6 years, and Kirsten Malzahn, Information Services, 5 years. So a lot of great people that started their careers and their place at MPL in November, and I truly appreciate all of them. I am happy to take any questions from the report. A lot of just data and information that was incorporated this time. Did catch up on some facility reports that were put in from Keith Perfect, which August and September are included. Our statistics, I think, are doing very well. And happy to take any questions if anybody has anything.
I think I would like to just emphasize a matter that was in the packet too, under your portion anyway, the after-school pickup thing. I know that the after-school pickup continues to be a problem, and that there was a paragraph in the packet about a friendly reminder, but since we have minions out there that watch this library board meeting, I'm sure, every month, I thought this is a good time to please talk to people about not using the library board parking lot as a pickup location in picking up the students from the high school, correct? Do you want to enlarge on that?
I'd be happy to. We do find that there are some parents that don't want to get caught in the queuing of picking up at the actual high school and in the locations that they've been designated to pick up their students. So they encourage their students to walk over to the library, and then they do the pickup in our parking lot, which has then created a congestion in our parking lot. It really doesn't help it, it actually makes it worse. We're a smaller parking lot. We don't queue out like the school does. We don't have, that way of queuing out like they do. So I would encourage, parents and caregivers not to use the library for picking up children from the school. I completely understand if their children is going over from the school and using the library for a while and then picking up. Not a problem at all. I can tell you that even the after school is a concern. We spend some staff time going out and moving people along because they queue up. They stop actually in the emergency no stopping and no parking zone right in front of right in front of the doors, and they stop and they wait, which makes people then go out onto 10 Mile. So we do have staffing that is, tends to get out there almost daily, moving people along, reminding them of the signage. Something that we will be, though, putting in effect, I'm happy to tell you, and it got moving this week just because of that, and also over the weekend, lots of events happen on our campus. And there was a lot going on this past weekend, which allowed us to see the library being used or not being able to be used because of all the traffic from the school or the city. And so what we received it was a comment that was very helpful, I will say, because the question was asked or posed of us, is there any consideration for quick 10-minute parking so that people who just need to use the library very quickly to pick up something, perhaps we could designate some parking in that way. So I'm happy to let you know that we are going to do that. Where our accessibility parking is, we have about 6 to 8 spots right in the front. The other 6 spots to the south are going to be 10-minute parking spots only. That will help the parents move, and we can tell them they can sit there for a moment and wait for their student. Or if someone is needing it because they're just dropping off very quickly and they're stuck in a slew of no parking options because of what's going on, that will be helpful, because what people are doing is they're parking in the drive-up, getting out of the car, leaving their car in the drive-up, and they're coming into the building. This weekend was a prime example of being super busy, which is wonderful, the campus, but not being able to help people navigate the library like we'd like it to too. So yes, we continue to communicate. I can tell you that parents are receptive though. When we go out and we move them along, I do get very positive feedback. No one seems to be curmudgeon, I'll say, as in terms of response. They understand it. So we've not had too much negativity back, but it's just reminding them that it might not be the best place to encourage your students to just pick up from school. But like I said, we're also working with just a lot of usage of the campus in general too when there's big events. And I think we've helped out with that a little bit as well.
Okay, good.
Yes.
Well, I hope
And we do
everybody
put the information, President
the
Crawford,
word.
in the schools, e-newsletters, we remind and send out those things. But, and like I said, people are very receptive when we do ask them to keep moving.
I just think you can never say it enough.
Right.
There's always
No, I
somebody
agree.
that didn't see it or hear it or read the letter or whatever. So,
Yes.
board members, if you get a chance and you're talking to someone that maybe has an opportunity to pick up a student at the library, make sure that you pass along the information. And about the new parking spot, make it sound really exciting to park in a new 10-minute parking area.
Well, and I'm
make it-
sure you've seen from the stats, our numbers are getting back up to what they used to be, which means the building is being used. And so that, not only with the school traffic, but just the use of the library, we want to be able to give that opportunity to people.
Okay, questions?
Julie, for the 10-minute parking spots, that's not going to require extra staff time to monitor it, is it?
No, I hope
Okay.
not.
Okay.
Yes.
I just want to be sure.
We'll see.
No, what I hope is that it will allow people to feel comfortable parking quickly and getting in and out of the building.
Okay.
And not creating it, by having that, I hope it stops some of the behavior of literally parking in somewhere where they shouldn't be at
Right,
all.
right.
So I'm confident that, this will be a good thing. No
Okay.
matter what, it offers quick service to people as well to get in and out of the building.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And I wanted to know real quick, how was the collaborative event with Novi School District? How did that go?
The breakfast or?
It was the 18th.
Screen-wise.
Screen-wise, yeah.
Well, first of all, the author was lovely. I'll be honest, I was disappointed with the turnout. We had 212 people registered, and so by knowing those numbers, we encouraged the author to fly in and be in person. Had it been low, we would have gone the virtual route, and then we only ended up with 59 in attendance. That's
no.
never happened to us before. Usually when we get registration like that, and because we were getting such a good response for in-person, we did not look at doing hybrid or offering it in different ways because we were trying to get us back to what that community read is like, bringing the author in and having them and the opportunity to be together and talk and share. So, but the people that went and attended enjoyed it. We did have over 200 checkouts of the book, so that's also wonderful that, that many people took an opportunity to read it. Great information she provided, and we will continue to do things like that with our district. This was not generated by the libraries like normal. This was actually a school district reaching out to us and wanting to be partners. So I appreciate that we could do that as a reciprocal opportunity, and they thought of us to be part of it. So we actually have a debriefing meeting next week. We've shared our disappointment of the numbers, but it was also a very rainy and dark.
Yeah.
It's like a scary book. It was a dark and rainy night, and it was. And I do think weather is a big part of our programming. People will go home and they'll be like, do I want to go back out when the weather's not great? So that unfortunately didn't help us either. But it was. I still believe it was a great event for us to have and to host with our school district. Thank you. You're welcome.
Okay, yes.
I have a few, thank you so much. I have a few things. So I'll quickly get to that one.
Sure.
Yeah, I was bummed too. I didn't go to it. I talked to this guy I live with, and he told me how everything went. But he said that it was an amazing presentation and everything. What we talked about was that there were so many other events that night.
I also heard that there was soccer games, all kinds of things in the district too.
Our PTO had a in-person meeting that night, and we were right across at the middle school on that dark and stormy night. And I thought, can I get out of here in time? And I didn't. But then there was, I think there was some other district meetings going on too, because one of the people that tutors my kid is a teacher in the district, and so I say all that to say, I wonder if in that debrief, if there can be a conversation of, let's look at calendar and see how we can get the maximum since we promised so many, because I'm sure that was discouraging, but I did hear it was great. Too bad that, everybody didn't get to enjoy it, right?
And another point to add, Trustee Mitchner, is the fact that it started at 6:30, and normally we start at 7. And I also think that played into dinner time and people trying to coordinate families and children when that is our audience specifically for that. So my recommendation would be to start at 7 like the library does.
Yeah.
Just to give those people a chance to go home and, get settled and then figure out if they're gonna go back out. So we've got a couple things to think about.
And that was really good, because you made me think about one more thing. I got the book for free because of the book club here.
Okay.
And I know a lot of other people did, and I did. I'm wondering if that's part of it too, if people felt like, well, I know a lot about it, because for the parent-to-parent book club, that was the book that Ben Manka did. It was his first one.
Right.
So I wonder if that might have had something to do with it too, where people were like, I already know about that. I don't know, just thoughts.
No, but a lot of great points that we will talk about, because again, we only want to grow it and make things like this, bigger and better.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's that. But great job on that. And then I had a question, because I love that you do the anniversaries. You remember when I was president, that was my little cue to write cards for people. One of the things that happens with any other company or job, people leave. But sometimes I don't know it because I'm not here day to day. I'm wondering if resignations can be in there. I know that happens at the school district, and it's kind of nice to know, because then you know who's leaving. You can hurry up and shoot them up. If you're a card writer like me sometimes, it's nice to be able to do that.
Okay,
so that would be helpful if that could be added to the part where it's anniversaries, just so we can kind of celebrate our people when they're staying or even when they're going. And then lastly, I just wanted to mention one of the other out and abouts that I don't see in the packet, but you know where you were at. And I'm like, where is it, Julie? Julie was, can I
absolutely
toot your horn? Yep. Okay, so Julie was at Deerfield for our parent PTO meeting, and she was our guest of honor. There is a card coming henceforth. I gotta order them on Amazon.
I thought the poster was fabulous.
Okay, yeah, we had this.
It's in my office.
Yeah, this guy I live with that helps out with PTO sometimes made her a beautiful Wildcat sign. But Julie did a fantastic job just informing our parent community about all of the things that the library has to offer. And a lot of people didn't know. I'm sporting my beautiful pen. This is my beautiful pen that I got that night. And it was just a really special night, I think. Again, one of the great things about Novi Public Libraries, and I think this is why we're being celebrated in November, is because we bring the library to people when they can't get to the library. And I consistently see that, and I've always seen that. And a lot of parents were like, I didn't know this. I'm working with one of the teachers with some multicultural events, and she talked to some of the sheets were great for conversation groups for some people who are new to America. So they were like, oh, wow, this is at the library and it's free. I get to have some conversations and, meet with some people that aren't at school, but still in the community. So thank you for doing that.
Well, thank you for the invitation. And
Yes.
I'll put that out to anybody, we welcome invitations to get to PTOs and to organizations in the community all the time so that we can connect one-on-one. That is, I think, one of the best ways to be able to share our story and what we have that's available. So thanks.
Thank you. That's
Well,
all I have.
Okay, I know that many of the staff are out in the community all the time. I mean, they're doing book discussions.
They sure are.
At the senior housing complexes and everything else. And so people see the face of Novi Library in the community. And I can't help but think that some of the libraries that have had issues lately with book challenges and some of the other challenges that they've had in their library tends to be maybe in some of the libraries where the staff is not out there hearing from people. Our staff is in the community and our board members are in the community, and we do hear from people. And if you're building relationships, people are not afraid to tell you what's on their mind. That's the way it is. Plus, you're building friendships, and so rather than somebody to come to us in a confrontational kind of way, I think it's a little more productive, where somebody identifies a problem or an issue, and then we can get ahead of it, and we can help to work for solutions without having to have some media, publicize it all over, and it gets to be a bigger problem than it was in the beginning. So anyway, kudos to staff for being out there, because I think that's very, very important in this community in particular, because the community is busy, right? So we have to really do outreach. I mean, outreach is really critical, I think, to this library's success. You can't just sit in the library anymore and wait for people to come.
No.
We've
do
had those
not.
days. We've had those days
And
where that happened. years
honestly, I
ago.
want to thank the staff because a number of them go out. It's not just me.
Right.
Our youth department, almost all of the librarians have in some capacity, a connection with someone outside of the building. Plus our communications manager, plus some of our other managers. I try, in fact, it's in their job description that they may serve as a face of the library. And we do want them to get to know them. That's how they build relationships and even become more comfortable, even when they want to ask something, that's difficult to ask, when they're looking for information or something they want in terms of information or a book. By building those relationships early, then it's allowing them to be asking sometimes some very difficult questions as well, that hopefully we can help with.
And if I may, through the chair, really it has a lot to do with staff time as well and how we construct our policies. If our staff didn't have the ability or time to do this, then that would be so detrimental to our community. So when we look at our policies, we always have to take that into account because everybody has so many hats in the library, especially Julie. And so, I know that this is your favorite thing, is to get out there, and it really shows. So that's just something to be conscious of when we're looking at policies like our collection policies, like how are we taking up our staff's time as well? Because this really is an important part of that relationship building in the community. And we live in Novi, who really appreciates and invests in our library, and we're really lucky that we have that. And I think that it's our job to keep that progressing forward and innovating that to make sure that we're stable for the future. So I appreciate all the time that the staff takes, and I echo what you said, Kathy.
Okay. Any questions regarding the director's report? Okay, very good. Moving along, we have time now for our second public comment. And once again, in order to hear all citizen comments at a reasonable hour, the library board requests that speakers respect the 3-minute time limit. This is not a question-answer session. However, it's an opportunity to voice your thoughts with the library board. Citizens must state their first, last name, and address.
Hi, Sharon Trumpy again. I'm so glad that you are interested in the questions of the board and of the community on the collections policy. I had several, and Ms. Dooley just asked one of them. One of my concerns, looking at the letter from Mr. Chair Curry, is the idea of reducing the time to respond to a challenge because of the undue workload that can place upon the staff and librarians. So that's probably best a question for Julie and her staff is how much time do they really need for that process. I think another thing that we need to keep in mind is I'm a writer. I have lots of friends that are authors and librarians, and if there's one thing I know about librarians, it's they love connecting people to the right book for them, and they love the First Amendment. And if we're creating policies that don't support that or don't give them the ability to do those things, what impact that might have on our ability to hire qualified staff during a time when there's a lot of challenges in hiring. Lastly, I found it curious that in Mr. Chair Curry's point number 3, he refers to the ALA, which has existed since 1876, as being a partisan and biased organization, and then uses the Federalist as his source material on that, which I would not consider a source free of bias. And the link specifically calls out the sexuality of the incoming president-elect for the ALA, which makes me wonder what the sexual orientation of the ALA president has to do with this policy. And I guess my concern is that Salem South Lyon just had a challenge to 16 books in their library. 15 out of the 16 were specifically dealing with LGBTQ+ characters or themes. And I'll note that 8 of those were teen fiction, 6 were teen nonfiction, and 2 were adult fiction. So I think that we need to be curious and ask good questions about what impact this might have and which communities might be targeted by our policies, whether that's our intent or not. So those are just questions that I hope will be answered in your discussions of the collections policy. Julie, congratulations on 15 years. And I'm thrilled about the 10-minute parking spaces, not as a parent who picks up a child in the parking lot, but as someone who loves the ability to place materials on hold. I truly value being able to just wait for my phone to be like, bing, your book's waiting, run in, get it, and go home. Because I have a long to-read list, and that's going to be really helpful to me. So thank you very much.
Okay, anyone else? All right. Seeing no further comments then to come before the board, we'll go into committee reports. So I guess we know that we're going to have some comments from the DEI committee, but were there other? In fact, I was going to ask Brian, you wanted to say something about our mandatory meeting, I believe? Or the strategic planning, for sure?
Yes, I wanted to talk about the strategic planning committee because we met with RTL. We did not meet with RTL until this Tuesday. So we got notes that will be in the packet for next time. And I wanted to cover briefly what we went over with RTL as far as our starting on the strategic process. RTL meets, they need to meet in the afternoon, so from our committee, I was representing the committee as the other folks didn't have their schedules are not as flexible as mine. So I became the member of the, speaking of what Director Farkas calls her core group for the strategic planning. Basically, we discussed the various meetings that they're going to be holding with the community and staff. They break down into staff meetings, a session with the board, and a session with the various community members. They were adamant that in each of these groups, there's going to be no cross-pollination. In other words, if you're going to have meetings with the library group, they're going to be either supervisor meetings or staff meetings. We as board members are not going to be invited, neither are supervisors of the staff, because they want to be sure they get everybody's opinion without getting having anybody intimidated, having anybody concerned how they come across, and so forth. Similar to the community sessions, we are not going to be invited to the community sessions. There are going to be various, there will be selections for the community, and they will all be separate sessions. Some of them will be remote, some of them will be in person. The board session, though, is going to require all of us, and hence we can't be remote per the OMA regulations. The date that we have, we work with various dates with RTL. We wanted to avoid the upcoming holidays, essentially, trying to schedule things over November and December. We are also looking to get RTL to travel to a minimum amount. They'll be coming out here 1 week to try to do as many sessions as possible, including the board session. And they will be coming out another week for the strategic retreat. They'll be doing a number of things remotely. They've got surveys that target all the way down to the elementary schools, and are designed for elementary school children to answer them. They're even skilled at figuring out, okay, did a parent really answer this? They were pretty comprehensive as what they were presenting. We came up with the date for them to come out. The week would be the week of February 6th. And Julie confirmed that they would be available for a luncheon meeting with the board. This will be a public meeting, so we'll have public comment, but it's primarily going to be structured as a workshop. We plan on doing no business during that time, and that will include the board, and that will include Julie, because Julie cannot participate with the supervisors and cannot participate with the staff. She is going to be participating with us as the board. So we sent out an invitation to everybody that should have come out today for a luncheon meeting on February 9th. We hope that this is enough advance notice. One of the other problems we had moving it forward from there is we are already committed with budgeting meetings and with board meetings for 3 sessions in January, so the board is going to be quite busy before we do that. So we hope that the 9th will work well for everyone. The way that is structured with RTL, RTL plans on being in here for 2.5 days. That will be at the end of their meeting, so we will be going last. They will hear from us after getting a flavor from everybody else in the community, which we also think would work rather well. As far as action items going forward, where they are going to be putting forward through surveys, those surveys are going to be on the website. They'll be available in the library. We'll be promoting them to get as many people to answer them as possible. In fact, we've all taken bets on how many we think we're going to get on at least from the folks on the committee. We met. The RTL meeting was Tuesday. We had the strategic meeting with our group, with Trustee Guramurti and Trustee Dooley yesterday, and then of course today. But in a nutshell, our action items is from the full board: submit the survey, promote the survey among community members, attend the board strategy workshop, which will be February 9th. And the last item is the strategic retreat, which will not be till almost a month after that. We do not have a date for that because they have to put out their list of when they can get all their sessions done, including the remote sessions, and then it takes about 4 weeks to put out the booklet. The strategic retreat would be optional. The entire board is invited. If we extend, of course, beyond the committee, it becomes a public meeting. So we have, think about, if you want to attend the full strategic retreat, that will also be a daytime event of some type. They have 2 methods of doing it. They do either a 7-hour meeting, or they do a meeting the night before and then a morning meeting. So if you are in a day job situation where your schedule is not flexible, we should know when the strategic meeting is at least 5 weeks in advance, 4 to 5 weeks in advance. Maybe even earlier, we'll be able to schedule that with them. So we will have some lead time. But that's the board's duties. The strategic committee, of course, is to monitor and support the process. And we've also talked to the marketing committee, which conveniently happens to be the same as the strategy committee, with just Trustee Dooley in charge of getting the promotion out so that we can drive those numbers.
Okay.
And that's essentially where we are with the strategy session, and we'll entertain any questions anybody might have.
Well, I just have a comment. I sort of would want, what is the name of the company again? Because I totally forgot.
Rethinking Libraries.
Rethinking
Libraries.
Libraries.
And they
Okay.
go by RTL
So,
as their.
I guess I'm going to caution the committee and also the staff, the Director Farkas, to kind of limit calling it RTL, because politically, RTL stands for Right to Life, and because we're in the midst of elections and everything else, when I kept hearing RTL, I got mixed up a little bit in the beginning, and I wonder if maybe if we say that to the public too much, that maybe they get confused as far as what RTL stands for. So while we can't necessarily say the whole thing, maybe, I think it would be better if we did.
Sure.
Okay?
That's-
Okay.
Point taken.
Any questions?
Yeah, I
Member
have-
Mishnah.
thank you so much. So, you mentioned there's separate sessions, and obviously that makes sense why. I'm curious, will we eventually get those notes without the names so that we can? Do you want me to continue?
Okay, did you have more questions? I didn't want to interrupt you.
Oh, no, I appreciate that. No, I was just saying, I'm wondering if the board will eventually have notes, without names, but just kind of getting a pulse of what our library community staff thinks and our actual general library community thinks.
Oh,
I
you
think
mean at
that's
the end?
helpful.
At the end?
Yeah,
No.
after
We will,
everything's
we will
over.
get a full report.
Okay.
The report will include, essentially, we heard from so many people, and these percentages had a concern of this
Okay.
level. You will actually get quotes that they will essentially take from, I mean, we're hopefully going to have thousands of surveys. So you're not going to have thousands of quotes, but you're going to have some comments from people from the public and from the staff, and they pride themselves, they made that comment several times, they pride themselves that you will not be able to tell
Good.
whether this came from a staff member, this came from the public. But yes, the report is due before the strategic retreat, so that everybody on that group will have that information. And then the strategic retreat will have a cross-section of staff, supervisors, board members. It may not be everybody on the board on the actual, staff, but, we can all be there. And, and it will be, well, like I said, it will be an open public meeting. But they will try to find 25 individuals they're going to work the actual workshop through
Okay.
of the strategic retreat.
Trustee Mitchner, they did tell us that the report typically is about 100 pages or more is what you will end up getting in terms of the data and the
Okay.
information to be able to see what's coming from all the feedback.
That's
And-
awesome.
And
Okay.
beyond the report, we will have a significant amount of raw data from the survey. So that we'll be, we can reference later. For example, maybe we want to look at something else where we know this question was asked. We have some significant raw data from the community.
And are you thinking, so I know that you gave us dates for a couple of these, which is very considerate, thank you. But the last one you don't have a date for yet. Are you thinking March?
Yes, and before the end of March. I would like it the week of the 21st is at least the date we threw around at this point. Yes.
Is there a
Because
reason why you're thinking that?
I would like all the current board members
Yeah.
who are been invested in this process, to be part of it. And I know that there's appointments and stuff coming up.
Yeah.
So,
That's
yes.
exactly where I'm at,
Yep.
okay? That's what I'm
So
like, I
we
think you know
actually
where I'm
talked about
going.
that. We did.
Yeah.
The group was wonderful, the committee wanting to make sure that that was taken into consideration, that the current board that has been involved will be involved, we hope, through the process, yes.
Thank you.
You're
Okay.
welcome.
Appreciate
Yeah,
it. That's exactly where I was going with that.
They need, once they finish, they will probably not be finished with their sessions till the second or third week of February. They need 3 to 4 weeks to compile and to put this 100-page report together.
So I was, based on calendar and us looking, I was hoping for like the week of the 21st is what I was hoping.
That's helpful. Okay, thank you so much. That's all my
Absolutely.
questions for you, Brian.
Okay, anyone
it.
else? Any comments or questions? Yes, members
Just
chair.
in terms of the soliciting community impact, the community listening sessions that they're gonna be, did they discuss how they're gonna engage, or how to get participation, or from what populations they'll be marketing to join?
So there'll be a ton of different ways to
Yeah.
invite and put out invitations. I mean, we have access to Patron Point, which is just our users, but then we also can do a actual postcard to all of the community members and offer up an opportunity for people to come and to be, to register and be part of the event. There's going to be a number of them. They're going to do virtual as well, so that way if someone, if someone can't make it or we don't have a seat, there's an opportunity to be involved virtually as well. So we're hoping to hit, everyone in our community. That is, at least for the ask and the reach out for people to be
So it's not
involved.
like that's something the library's doing, reach out.
We will work with them to do that, yes.
There's-
Incentivizing is the best way.
Yes. So we've talked about, it being on the website, it being on social media, doing a postcard to all of our homes, putting it in Engage. So we're coming along at a schedule too with how we're choosing dates that we know Engage is coming and making sure it's in those major pieces that would be going out to the community. And I'm also confident that, the city and their avenues will also help us as well. We have partnerships with the chamber. We can be putting out to a number of different ways for our community to know that there are opportunities to take part.
And again, my only concern was when you're doing consumer research, you wanna obviously capture your customers, but also they've got potential customers you're not.
Yes, we're thinking also just homeowners in general, absolutely.
And I would
There's-
think.
That's a great
clubs and-
question.
Clubs and organizations, even if they're not residents of the community,
Yes.
clubs and organizations also
Yep.
will be contacted, correct?
Yep.
Okay.
And then
But
are
there's a
members of the
large number
community-
of, there's a large area in here as far as data that Rethinking Libraries requires from the library staff, and some of it's in TLN, some of it we have in Patron Point, and Julie's staff is going to be very busy collecting that over the next 3 to 4 weeks to get to Rethinking Libraries. So they have, I just covered what our duties were, which are, compared to theirs is fairly light.
Yeah, okay. Member Misher, did you have?
Oh, I was just, I had something for my committee, but I was just making a note. When you said you want to make sure that clubs and organizations are also invited, even though they're not a part of the community, I'm like, they are a part of the community too, right? They build this as well, so I'm glad that you mentioned that, that's all.
Okay.
Also, the only other thing is when they're here for those 3 days, there are going to be times in the staff, we've talked about getting them over to one of the retirement communities. There are going to be times where they could engage, for example, if the Rotary has a breakfast or wants to meet with them over lunch, they are going to have time for events like that. So there are open areas in their schedule that we'll be able to do during that first phase in February.
Well, I, for one, am very excited about it. And
Yeah.
I'm sure
Very
that, I know that staff probably, it sort of is excited, and yet, it's going to be a burden, more so than just everyday library activities, for sure. But I hope you're all feeling excited and anxious to see what kind of information we get back, to hear how great we are, once again. It's always a good thing to hear, but we also want to hear what people think and suggestions of other things that we can do. We'll learn a lot from this. We're really going to learn a lot, so. Okay, so, other committee reports? I know, Member Missioner,
I
did you
was-
have your hand up?
I did. I was just gonna ask if I could do bylaws really quick, because I think it's gonna be way quicker than
Oh,
the next one.
okay.
We did have a meeting. We had our first meeting with me as the chair of the bylaw committee. Now, it is an ad hoc committee. I just want to put that out there for anyone that doesn't understand the difference. Ad hoc is kind of an as-needed committee. We have a job to do, we do it, and we kind of like go dormant until we have the next job to do. Differently than maybe policy committee, which is definitely more robust, or any other committee that we have. I think bylaws is the only ad hoc committee, if I'm not mistaken. But we do have our meeting on the books, yay, and that's for November 15th. And what I'll tell you, my goal is really just to go over the bylaws and kind of see where we're at, pick up where we left off a little bit, but also, since we have a new committee, get kind of a first read. So you might see another meeting after that potentially as well. You'll hear more after November 15th, but
Okay,
yeah.
okay, very good.
Yeah.
And I know finance doesn't have any comments, right? You didn't meet, or I think some of you didn't meet, really, finance, and, all right, and HR did not meet. And Member Dooley, I know
Yes.
that you have two committees
I
here you could
do.
report on, so you want to talk about fundraising first?
Yes,
or-
so for events marketing and fundraising, obviously our packet kind of came out quicker this month, and I was like, oh man, I missed sending you guys the email again to get the events and programs that you've attended. So I wanted to give the opportunity right now for this particular committee.
I attended, and I didn't get to attend the whole thing, so let me say that. I got to eat delicious food and talk to a lot of fantastic people at the Broadway event. Y'all, this was something. I don't know if you talked to anybody about it, but our friends at the library did a fantastic job with this. It was something that felt like it actually felt like a paid event. There was a very big spread. The singer, I believe her name is Vanessa, she was really nice, but aside from her being a kind person, her voice is amazing. I think that's why she was paid, not because of her attitude, but the attitude helps. So it was just a really incredible event. It was so packed. And our friends are just so gracious. Like they're so friendly. The friends. I guess that's what they're supposed to be. But it was pretty amazing. So kudos.
Yeah, and then really quick on page 70, you'll have the summary for events marketing and fundraising. So Trustee Bartlett, Trustee Gromuthi, and I met with Julie and our communications manager, Dana. And we're happy to announce, just to make it public again, that you can sign up for your library card online now, which is awesome. And actually, I was supposed to renew my library card, and I got my automated your library cards renewed, so I was very excited about that because of the electronic system. So it was very exciting for me. It's working great, so I wanted to let everybody know that. And then I know some people have asked, including myself, about the digital library app. That has been a journey for Julie and her staff.
It's such a kind word.
It's been a journey. But we are excited to say that it's potentially going to do a soft launch, hopefully in November, but we have to test it and things like that. But that'll be another value add that we're excited that's coming. So I just wanted to thank the staff for that, and thank you guys for putting up with everything.
And to add, Trustee Dooley, just to let you know that I am sending two staff next week to a library marketing conference. I'm very excited for them to, hear lots of great things. Mary Ann Zermulin and Dana Britannic are going to go. Obviously, Dana being head of communications and manager with communications, but Mary Ann also shows some wonderful expertise when it comes to marketing and with working with the support services department and putting out brochures and connecting. Her staff is literally the first faces, when you walk in the building. So she brings a wonderful talent as well. So sending the two of them, I think, will be fabulous for them to, put their heads together and also look into vendors and opportunities for maybe new things that we can be looking at, for the future. So I'm excited for them to be going.
Thank you. So that's pretty much it for events, marketing, and fundraising. And for DEI, our committee met. I'm the chair for diversity, equity, inclusion as well. with my colleagues, Trustee Mishner and Trustee Gurumurthy. We also have staff members Julie Farkas and Nicole Williams on there, who is our HR specialist. So we met on the 17th because Julie was kind enough to make sure that we had time to look over Trustee Shirakuri's reflections and concerns about the collection policy last month. Because we tabled it, we didn't have the discussion to give any preface, so I wanted to make sure that you had the drafted materials of the collections policy in the packet this month again, so you had that in front of you to kind of go forward and do some reflecting and thinking so that we're prepared to come back, hopefully, with recommendations from policy committee as well as our committee for DEI to move forward with a good collections policy next month. One of the things that we didn't get to say last month was this has actually been a long time coming. It's an updating of the policy and a consolidation of the policy. This isn't really rewriting too much. It's consolidating and updating and getting everything up to speed. We were given the context that it's been almost 10 years, is that right? No, not 10 years, but it was a long time. It was pre-COVID.
2017.
2017. So, sorry. But it's been a really, really long time. And so, as Trustee Mishner had mentioned in her presentation, you have to kind of go over these policies every so often to make sure that you're up to speed, up to date, and, doing what's good for your whole community. So I just wanted to let the whole board understand that this isn't like coming out of the ether. This is just, this is updating the policy. Yes.
To add to that, we have been in a regular review of policies over the last year. We try to do that on a regular basis. I have no problem letting you all know, in fact, you did know that back in the fall, we did have a reconsideration of a material, which was handled within myself and my staff. But that allowed us the opportunity to look at, again, when you're using the policy, how you might want to improve it, look at the language, and since it was 2017, seeing if there were ways to improve it and make new language additions to it. In addition to that, I have staff that are going through school. It's always great to get their perspective when they're learning in library school. In fact, we have one of our team members that is actually working on her master's degree now and was in a collection development class. When you can take on that opportunity for that learning, so that person weighed into it. We know that for over a year that reconsiderations and concerns of materials have been going on. This has been on our radar. So when ours, occurred back in the fall, you go through webinars, you're being offered things through our Michigan Library Association, our American Library Association to better yourself, to hear more, to learn, and to gain more knowledge. And so this is all part of what we brought in terms of, some of the changes that the staff and I have made to this policy before it came to DEI. So there's a number of culminations of reasons why this would have been looked at. And it has been being looked at and massaged since the fall. So you're talking a year.
Right. Right. So thank you, Julie. So that's something that we missed out last month was we didn't have that context. We weren't able to bring that forward. So I'm really glad we have the opportunity tonight to give all the board members that background and that context, which is why this policy is being revised, updated, and brought forward. So with that being said, we did receive the communication from our fellow trustee. It was sent later in the evening on Thursday, and our meeting was Monday the 17th. So, we were poring over it together to make sure that we could address what we could address, and then, have a game plan going forward of what we need to do as a committee. We also recommended that policy committee be engaged as well when looking over the policy as it's drafted, but also with the concerns brought forward by a trustee. And what I wanted to do today was give the opportunity and the floor to my colleague so that he can kind of go through his email with us and give like clarification and like real-time input so that all of us can maybe ask questions, but then also we can have like a good discussion for clarification going forward before the committees meet for the next month's session. So with that being said, Trustee Shirakuri, I'd like to give you the floor.
Thank you. So, obviously, when we saw this, it's quite a meaty, it's a lot of work, so I can appreciate how much effort's gone into some of the past year and stuff. And I don't want to pretend that, like, my comments were the sum total of all examination, because not everything did I have. You guys haven't had time, I didn't have time either, but, so, kind of the first two comments were kind of structurally, just in how it's being presented to us. The original policy had like section C1, C2, C3, C4A, something like that. Whereas the new policy presented seems to have done away with that structure. So there's a second comment there. So it didn't map easily. And actually, and comment number one was actually only when we met in person, I realized the red lines are just the red lines from the prior version the internal committee was looking at, but not from what's our current policy. So those are kind of the sum total of those first two things. Is I'm hoping that as we move forward, if it's possible to either explain why we've done away with that distinct mapping, which or shoehorn it back into the original mapping, I think would be something like that makes it easier to sequentially go through it, because there's a lot of stuff here. Sure. The original policy really, as I read it, the reason C1, C2, C3, those are distinct policies, totally separate areas.
Right.
So that's more a structural request on that.
Sure.
And I would say, as a preamble to that, I'd like to ask, I guess the director is part of this. Like, we have a food policy, for example, that came up in the last meeting, right? Mm-hmm. And there was a very succinct explanation why we need to revisit it. We already have a food policy, why do we need to revisit it? Well, somebody invented Uber Eats. It's causing problems. So, what's the raison d'etre? Why, I want to make sure we're not building a new house when we need to, chip away some torn paint and repaint it or something like that, right? This looks like a huge rework or a total rewrite from scratch. So what were the weaknesses in the old policy? What were we doing poorly? Is this type of work product required, or should we go through the original thing and sequentially bring it up,
Which is why I give you all the original policies, so that you can see where the changes have occurred from the original policies to the current one that's being, that was drafted and then brought to you. So you have all of those.
I do, but what I'm saying is it's not, okay, so for example, it's not like C1 we're making the following changes. There is no C1 in the new policy. It's not C2 or,
No, we've put them into the policy and just made it one large policy addressing different parts of collections and different ideas that we've put together, so.
Yeah, I guess, so there's the first question. Is,
Right.
what's the benefit of getting, or what's the reason for getting rid of those segments?
It actually came from the staff. They wanted a more succinct policy that when they were pulling out and it had to deal with collections, they weren't pulling 5 different collection policies. They would pull one and have the information that they thought would be useful to the guest, should they need it or should they need to refer to it. So it was actually cleaning up and making it more one succinct collection development policy instead of, reiterating certain types of collections that are in the building, bring it all together. So that, for them, it's actually much easier to use. I do support that. I think
Yeah.
it is much easier when you're pulling one large collection development policy and you have different categories that then you can refer to depending on the types of collections we might have.
Yeah, I guess
So
just,
that-
on that one, I'll
for-
just say, I'm
yeah.
not sure, 2 reasons. One, I'm not sure, I think I don't find that the former structure or the former organization was detrimental to understanding our collections policy. I also think it makes it harder to understand what's being edited and what's being changed.
And I'll be happy to, in fact, I've already worked with the DEI committee. I've gone back, and so when we see the next draft, whenever that is decided, I've already gone back and I've noted the original to new text for you. So I went ahead and cleaned that up for you already. What I will also do, which I actually provided to the DEI committee, was where pieces of other policies are just in now the one policy being presented as well, so that you can see where those have been brought into that new policy.
Okay,
Absolutely.
yeah, and then I guess continuing on, my third comment was primarily one about how it speaks to the concept of federalism in American government and that principle, but how we also reference to other things. So I am not in general a fan of saying we're going to delegate our responsibilities over this organization by taking their work products and making them ours on an automatic basis. So for example, state of Michigan, okay, so federal government, for example, has car seat regulations. State of Michigan has its own car seat regulations. They have not said that we will just follow the federal things, 100%. If the feds update it, I think it's totally appropriate for the state to take a look at it and say whether or not we want to update it or not. And as the current state is, we have not taken the last update. So right now, the state of Michigan's car seat regulations are different than the federal government's recommendations. So what that goes to is, again, any sort of blanket endorsement of another organization I don't think is appropriate for us to make, good, bad, or otherwise. I think it's more important, we can certainly rely on high-quality organizations out there and their work products, but we should be, as trustees, analyzing them ourselves to see whether or not they suit our community's needs. And that's, I think it's more than semantics. I think it's more a principle about how we run this thing, right? So that's my number one area of discomfort is you can see the ALA is a very active organization. They're making changes every year. There's new policies, new ideas, new things being propagated there. I want to make sure our language doesn't say there's some sort of autopilot. It automatically filters into our organization. They're a very different organization, a very different structure, and a very different background. And they serve different needs than we do. So, should I continue on? Okay. Yeah. Now, fourth point was, I think you guys have always, like with the other challenge, you guys were prompt and timely on it.
I don't like to call it a challenge, it's a reconsideration, which I appreciate the word reconsideration.
Okay.
Challenges, I think, when you get to the board's position and someone is not comfortable with the work that's been done, at least to consider the material. So I would propose that we keep the word reconsideration and use that language.
And just for clarification, that's an industry term, is that correct?
Yes, it is.
That's what I
Okay.
thought.
So challenge is a vernacular term then, I guess? Or?
It's media.
Okay. No, fair enough.
So is ban book. I mean, I think you look for, those words to bring attention. And so I'd like to use a word that I think is more responsible for the organization.
Okay, that's fine. I just didn't, I actually don't know the origin, which, I know what words I read in the newspaper, I know what words I read here, so. So in terms of identifying a timeline for reconsideration, I often believe the best thing to just is sometimes be silent on that things. The general expectation, which our library exceeds, is they're prompt, courteous, and timely on almost every single request. I find putting an actual timeline on things, I think that's, it sends the wrong message. We are not the type of library that, we're not that last scene in Raiders of the Lost Ark where something's going to go into a giant room and be top people will look at it, right? But the interpretation can be there, right? So 30 days is a very easy way to say, if I want to be cynic, you're pushing it past the next meeting, you're pushing it past the next, next month, whatever I'm objecting to is, the reality is, I believe you would you're much more prompt than that, especially if it's an issue of major crisis, right? So if somebody came to you and said, oh my God, it turns out the middle of this book is the 1978 centerfold from Playboy, and it's in the children's section, probably 30 days is not what you'd wait. You'd probably walk down the hallway and take a look at that, right? So I just think you're better to be silent on the actual dates there, the time. I think you guys are
We
prompt.
wanted to be more proactive as a staff in order to put a timeline in. We felt that
Yeah.
that was a discussion we had all together is what works, what time do we need to do the research? And that was a time frame that the staff felt comfortable with, which is why we put it in.
Yeah, and you know what? There might be time where that's not enough, right? So I'd say,
But I think we have an opportunity where we can work with that. I think
that's-
you would
and-
give
and-
me that latitude,
I'm
but
just saying by being silent on it, you are being proactive. You are being responsive and proactive. It doesn't need to, no point in creating a bureaucratic deadline where one doesn't need to exist.
I think I would leave that to staff. If staff has discussed it and they're the ones that are going to be doing the work, I think the recommendation holds, should be considered for sure. I think that makes sense to me.
Okay.
And if they can work around, I'm sure they would tell a patron,
Absolutely.
it's going to take more time. Your particular reconsideration request is going to take more time. We have always tried to do it within 30 days, but yours is going to take a little more time, but I think they know from the kinds of interaction they've had with patrons, they know how much time, that they could meet that deadline easily. And I think patrons would want a time frame. I mean, I feel like a lot of the patrons that are coming with a problem would really like to know, are you just going to shelve this and you'll get back to me someday?
That's how we felt.
Yeah, I think that's where that's coming from.
Okay.
And I get that, I
Yeah,
understand.
and again, these are my comments on reading it, so people can, yeah, I mean, it's how
Yeah, we don't
perception.
have to do what you say.
Yeah, no, not just that, it's that weird thing about perception, right? It's like,
You're just giving us,
Yeah.
your discussion, and we
Yeah.
appreciate that.
No, and my point is-
We appreciate it.
Yeah, and that was just on the perception of time limits. Do they set a maximum or a minimum in the person's
Okay.
mind, right? So, there's some specific things, but since we have our policy committees looking at it, I'll kind of leave it to you guys unless you have a specific question about those. Section 5, there was just one
Sorry,
thing.
excuse me. Do you mind continuing to do what you're doing? Because the public, the whole public, I know some people look at the packet, everybody doesn't, so they look at these meetings to find out more.
Yeah.
So I'd love it if you continue to go through, because I think that's only fair to our public since it's an open
Yeah,
meeting.
so you want me to go through each section of?
You
item
wrote
4?
it, so I want you to cover everything. Yes, please.
Okay, well.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, and again, it's, okay, so that's on the timeline. But again, that's open to discussion or to disagreement as to whether or not you.
I think you could,
What
you
kind
could
of-
summarize each number. I don't think you
Sure.
have to read word for word.
You already answered the question about why we're not using the word challenge, so thank you for the education there. There's a thing that we're restricting reconsiderations to Novi residents. In the past, and in all of our other programming or any of our public comments or listening sessions, we've never had that restriction. Is there a reason we're adding that to this specific?
Actually, it came from reviewing different policies from different libraries, and we found that that was actually a standard that we were seeing. It would allow us to focus specifically on those who are our taxpayers, is how we're feeling. That is who supports the collections. You know, programming, you say that anyone can come, that's true, but we could always limit our programming to our Novi residents because that is who we serve. So we felt that that was appropriate. They are the ones building the collection, buying the collection. When we take a request for an order of a book, we ask if they are Novi residents. So we are really trying to give that support specifically to the community that we serve.
Okay, so we'll also exercise that like on future things like community listening sessions.
Well, those are
public comments
programs.
and things
So,
like
I
that.
mean, that's different than an actual collection development.
Yeah.
Yeah,
No.
purpose.
Through the chair, if that's okay,
Yeah,
Trustee Shirkri. Yeah, I kind of thought about that feedback that you gave about community listening sessions. So the thing with that is programming is public. It's not just open to Novi residents. Technically, anyone can register for a program, including community listening session, and especially those were broadcast on social media too. So really, anybody can attend that, and you can't really geo-fence that. But collections are physically in our building, whether it be bought digitally or physically through books and periodicals, and those are bought and paid for by us and not gated. Does that make sense? Or they're a little bit more gated because we're actually physically paying for that as opposed to social media. That's what I was thinking about.
Well, Chair, permission to engage in informal discussion, right? So for example, we have, we listen to residents of our community here, public comment. Is that something that would be restricted to Novi residents in the future?
I don't think we can per
I don't
OMA.
think you can do that. I
Yeah.
mean, you're talking about doing surveys for our strategic planning and reaching out to groups that might not be living in Novi and yet they're part of our Novi community. If we don't get that feedback, you know, I think that's a misnomer. But the collections, to me, I see them as a tax-paying purpose and entity. They own them. They are owned by our community. So I feel like we should be focusing on the collections for the Novi community specifically and for those residents.
Yeah, I mean, so isn't everything we do technically owned by our community? Like the effort we put in, the energy and effort our staff puts into creating a program.
Sure.
That's actually something our community is paid for.
Some
I'm
are
just,
grants.
and this is a question.
Some are grants. I
Some-
mean,
Some are
Yes,
grants, okay,
not-
but.
Some are
So,
donations,
I mean,
some are,
hypothetically, can you limit let's say it's a really popular thing. Can you limit it to Novi residents?
well, the question is, would you want to do that?
No, my question to you is, can you? Are you allowed to?
I have not had a direction from the board to do that. And I wouldn't.
Is it legal?
Oh, Not really walking into our building, it's a free library,
I
you
mean,
have
if we-
access.
no, no, if we have like a
But the
sign-
collections,
No, let's say we have like a sign-up session. Let's say I get some super duper author who comes to give a speech, and we know it's gonna be oversubscribed. Can we limit that to Novi residents?
yes, we can, absolutely, if we chose to do that. Yes, we have the ability to do that.
Okay, so,
I think
We've chosen not to in the past, but yes, we do. We do have the capability, and there are a number of libraries that actually do. Programs specific based on, the programming budgets and stuff, they will only say it's open to their particular library residents.
okay. So-
We have not been that specific.
Okay, and so going to, so let's take some, like we've had our various listening sessions. Could we limit those to Novi residents?
I think that's a discussion to have, should you want to talk about programming in general. That's not collection related.
I mean, have we had challenges or reconsiderations coming from outside the community?
For programming or for
Well,
collections?
as is in this policy?
Yes, we have.
Okay, and that's problematic?
I think it is. I think we're using staff time that's for something outside our community and not specifically us. We're not working specifically with the taxpayer. I do. I mean, do you want me to spend that kind of time with someone who lives hypothetically in Livonia? Is that worth the time, I guess, is for you to
I mean, I
answer?
guess what I'd say is this is one of the many fashions in which the public might take issue with how we run our library. This
But
is the
why-
only one we're specifically
But aren't we
limiting to.
gearing ourselves towards our community and doing right for our community? So why are we taking that particular stance with someone outside of?
Well, I guess, I mean, again, in future.
I would think they'd want to deal with their own library.
Well, I agree, but again, and.
So
like
by
the-
putting it
but I
in,
guess with our various listening sessions, community sessions, things like that.
I think,
we
but I
have
think we
our-
should
I think
stick
we're
with the
talking two
collection
things.
and
We're
not
talking
fair enough.
programming,
listening sessions.
programming
So,
to
anyway,
collections.
that's- Yeah,
Well,
okay, I mean, it's.
and we also have a question.
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
or
I
comment
do,
from
and I
Commissioners.
just want to be clear, what I think would be helpful, and if we don't want to go this route, that's fine. But I think it'd be helpful, since you wrote out the letter, you made it succinct. Yeah, you don't have to read every little bit, but I think laying out your points is helpful, because as you were talking, I was making notes, so I could just address everything at once. But if we're not going to do that, then I'll go into some of my thoughts if we want to do that a different way, because we're kind of going into different things. So I'll throw that out first for consideration. The second thing that I wanted to say to the listening session thing, which, come on, we only had 2 or 1.5. So we've only done that 1.5 times. The reason why the community listening sessions were open to the public, and they had to be, is because every trustee was invited to that. So if we know our OMA, which we should, right, our Open Meetings Act, I gave everybody a book and a whole bunch of materials, and Claire's given us presentations, so we have to remember what we're told as trustees. We have a responsibility to know our role. We cannot have a listening session that's open to the public where every trustee can come to it and then say, oh, sorry, just Novi. We can't do that. We would be breaking the law.
So
I just,
if I could,
may
just to
I
clarify,
finish?
no, just to clarify.
How
Can
you
we
cut
keep
me
our,
off when I'm in the middle of
I'm
Just
just
clarify,
gonna,
so
I'm just-
then the bypass to this restriction would be then.
I'd like to finish, if that's okay.
okay, but just let me say, let's just keep our discussion to the policy and
Yeah.
to the things that have
Okay.
to do with the policy, not something that occurred in the past. Let's
Okay.
talk about,
Sure.
let's try to keep to the point of
Yeah,
the
and
policy that
so
we're
it's clear, I
discussing
didn't.
here. And I think you're going in order, are you not going in order?
I'm going in
Yeah.
order, and my intent, this was, just so we're clear, I
Okay.
didn't really ask for this
And now, Member
time
Misser.
at the meeting. I helped we have committees considering this stuff, and the point was to
Okay.
deliberate in that manner, but I'm happy to discuss it. So, I guess, then I want to make sure
I
that.
didn't get to finish. I'm sorry, am
Oh.
I able to? Because
Oh,
I know
please
a
do,
lot of
yes.
other people
Yeah,
talked and I
yep.
didn't. So is that okay?
It's fine.
I appreciate it, thank you. So my point, I didn't bring up the listening sessions. It was a whole conversation about it. So I definitely want to make sure that we're being fair as a group and not making it seem like that's something I brought up in the past. It was discussed quite a bit before I went to it. I gave it as an example of the Open Meetings Act, which was a lively discussion about what's what. And I think we just have to remember what we do as trustees. We can't restrict the public. That's all I was saying, because that was going on for a long time, and I think that's a simple one to like nip in the bud. That's all. That's what I was trying to say with that. But then I didn't know if you were going to speak to the point of like if we're going point by point and you want me to also engage with everyone else, I'm happy to do that. I don't want to be cut off if I have things to say, though, if it's at the end and we're like, oh, we talked about it enough. So I'm just trying to figure out our format here. If it's just informal, that's fine too.
I mean, just a few moments ago,
informal.
you
I
asked
mean-
me to go through each point, so otherwise I was
Yeah.
happy to summarize the
So
high
do you want to
level.
speak to the points that he's already mentioned?
I will do that, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and I do appreciate you going through each point, so thank you. I'm not saying that was a bad thing. I just want to make sure I know what's happening. Okay, so I did some research, and I'll speak to the things that you've already talked about, and I do appreciate that Julie already mentioned a lot of it, with looking at what libraries are doing in our communities, but not just our community. There's libraries all over the world doing the same thing. And in order for us to be a CUSAC, considered library, or even the MAME award that we're getting, those things are going to be looked at and reviewed. What are we following the ALA accreditation? That's a big deal. Also, the Freedom to Read statement. Every library that I researched had linked to that in their policy, so I'll just mention that. I'm happy to read that if you want, because what's in there seems fair, but I think that we're doing what our industry does. That's super important to understand. We're following suit. If we want to be the library that President Crawford talks about, we have to make sure that we're on par with other libraries. Michigan has like the two main library schools, right? U of M and Wayne State. And it's a really cool thing that we get to be a part of that, that grouping. So I wanted to speak to that. Now, what I noticed in a lot of my research is that typically 75 days is actually the starting point that a lot of libraries, you know that, that a lot of libraries give. So I think 30 was actually being a generous starting point. If your reconsideration is being taken seriously, I think you do want that extra time. My thought process is that you do want that extra time for that staff member or director, or even if it does come to us, give us time to really look into it. So typically what I found is 75 days is pretty typical. So I'm finding a lot of the things, the ALA, Bill of Rights, the Freedom to Read statement, a lot of our sister libraries, and I brought their policies with me today, linked to that. So a lot of the things there were noted. So we are on par. I know that we want to be on par. We want to be a good library, right? Or the best library. And then the challenge and reconsideration piece, I mean, I saw both. I saw some libraries actually in their policies say challenge at one point and reconsideration at another point. And I think that was, I don't know how big of a deal that is, but I do think,
Yeah, and ALA does use the word challenge on their website as well.
But I saw a couple different things there.
We don't have to follow it all the way, right, Sheree?
Agreed?
So there's that. So those are the things that I believe, yes, I believe those are a lot of the things that you spoke to. And please continue. I just want to make sure, like I was watching and taking notes and I thought, oh no, I don't want to get to the point where like this is over and they're like, Tara, we want to go home. And I'm like, man, I was being quiet. Because even when I talked, it was like, whoa, whoa, whoa. And I'm like, hey. So, okay.
Okay,
Okay.
all right.
So again, I would prefer to give you a high-level overview because I think many of these things need to be discussed in our policy and our DEI committee. And so, Trustee Mitchell, again, when I talk about the good work products at ALA, my issue is with us incorporating by direct reference as a blank check.
I don't think you need to worry about
So,
that, actually.
I believe anything-
Because I know for a fact that we look at a variety of sources before we are not in lockstep with any one organization. But certainly, I mean, we want feedback from those organizations to know the kind of things that they're promoting and the kind of things that are going on in the industry. So,
And I would just add, just so people understand, ALA is a association made up, it's an industry association. It's not our parent organization. It's an elected body by librarians. So as an example, I'm a civil engineer. So every year, the American Society of Civil Engineers, which is similar, puts out a report that we are underspending on infrastructure and we need to go by 10x on roads and 5x on pipelines. And you know what, as a civil engineer, it would be good for me if they agreed with that, but at the same time, I'm also a resident and a taxpayer, and I'm like, yeah, I also like funding things like schools and libraries and the military, right? You know, if you've listened to ASCE, we shut all that stuff down and just build pipelines and highways. So ALA is a industry organization. I will stand by my statement. It has become highly partisan over time. And that's not unusual. We see the same thing with the American Federation of Teachers, other organizations like that have become very partisan. And
I don't
And
mean
so-
to stop you, but I don't want to get into a debate
Yeah, I
about
don't
whether
either.
they're
I'm just-
Marxist or whatever, because
Yeah,
I don't
so-
think that's what we're here for.
and that's.
I would like to keep to,
Okay.
you know, if you have some things that you have questions, sincere questions about the policy and the changes, that's what I'd like to address.
So, yeah,
You know,
I've
and stay
always-
away from, you know, what
Okay,
your
so I've
opinion
spoken
is,
to
because
this.
we
I don't-
all
I-
have an opinion
Okay,
about
so my
it.
big thing is that we should not incorporate anything by automatic reference.
I agree.
Anytime they make a change, we should promptly review it and see whether or not it suits our
I think you
library.
would be happy to know that that's the way it works.
So, in section 5, there's a sentence that was eliminated, and I believe that needs to be here. Ultimate responsibility for material selection rests with the library director, who operates under the policies of the library board. Harry Truman said the buck stops here, and that has to be there. Local author criteria, you know, I would just expect, you know, I would, unless you guys think you're gonna be massively overwhelmed in volume, I tend to think of my locality as a little bit bigger than just Novi. So, you know, if there's an author from Northville, South Lyon, Southfield, wherever, and they want to give us a copy of their book, I'm not opposed to it, so. But that's,
Well, we had it specific to Novi because there are space concerns.
okay,
When you do that, and then if you accept someone from Northville and you don't accept from Livonia, and then you do from, so we're trying to be very
Fair enough.
cognizant of our community.
Okay.
That's where we're going with that.
yeah, that's fine. Like I said, you know, and as I saw, you even have a period, you have a policy here for when those local products get taken off the shelf. So, you know, again, play that by ear, right? If you have room, take a good book. If you don't, right? So, and again, 7 talks about how it's automatically including things. I believe the more pragmatic approach would have been to review existing policy C3, because I'm not convinced it was that bad. And then let's see what changes we want to make, because C3 did mimic most of an ALA policy that was previous. Again, freedom to read, we cannot incorporate that by reference. And then the second sentence in that statement is incorrect, I believe, in what we've written. Yeah, and I guess the gist is I'm happy with the process that Trustee Crawford has mentioned. We're sending it back to our committees. They're going to methodically go through it. Yeah, collections is the heart and soul of what we do as a library. I want to understand that, right? If we don't have a collection, you don't have a library. And again, I have respect for the ALA, but I also want people to understand the history. The Great American Library was started over 150 years before the ALA. And so libraries have been, excellent libraries have served many of our communities, independent of the umbrella organizations. So they're a resource, but they're not the Bible, so to speak. Thank you.
Okay, I appreciate your last comment here. I would, of course, like to share my thoughts with the rest. I request Chairman Crawford's advice on how to best move forward. I like that. I appreciate that. I'm all for it. I'm all about it. Okay, so, I mean, this is good discussion, yes. Oh, okay, Member Missioner.
Thank you. That was everything, right? Trustee Cherukuri?
Yeah, I mean, happy to dive into detail if you need it. But
No, it's okay. I did have comments on some of the other things you said, so I wanted to be able to bring those to the table with that. If I don't want to step on your
Relating
toes.
to his
Yeah,
suggestion.
so relating to the document and what he just said.
Okay.
Okay? That's what I'm here for, right? Okay, so you know, you mentioned the ALA, you've mentioned it several times, some concerns about it, and I think the thing that I was concerned about is point 3, and I can't even say this and feel good about it. That link from that publication that does talk about the sexual orientation of the ALA president. I don't know that, speaking to what President Crawford said earlier about we need to be very careful, I don't think that's fair for us to consider that as a reason for endorsing or not endorsing or going with the ALA or not going with the ALA. And it reads, and I'm not going to say some of this, in general, my biggest concern is the over-reliance on the ALA, especially where it is an open-ended endorsement, or it even follows. As I mentioned during the meeting, the ALA has become a seriously partisan and biased organization. Its president-elect is a self-described Marxist who advocates for the, and I don't want to say it, but it says the querying of libraries, and then it goes into a link that says, amid public concern about grooming kids, American Library Association picks Marxist lesbian as president. I realize I need to say it because it's in here, and it's something that we're considering based on this. So I think that we have to be very careful. In the same way that you don't want us to be overly partisan, obviously this is definitely leaning in a way that I think could be very problematic for us if we're looking at things from that direction. So I think we have to be very careful there. In your note, you also, at the bottom of page 73, said citizens. Our staff are responsible to our citizens and no one else. But then you said that you also wanted to consider other people that are not citizens of Novi in the author policy. So it's a little tricky because here you're saying the citizens through their elected officials are supreme, and I've got thoughts about that. But then the other piece was that we should open up the author criteria to everybody. So I guess it seems like it doesn't mesh well.
Well, I
And-
can explain that.
Sure. So I just wanted to throw that piece out there. I think we got to be careful with citizens. Actually, in that presentation, if you guys watch it, I actually spoke that I like patrons more than guests because I feel like if I'm a guest in your home, you take care of me, but I can't just open up your fridge. I feel like if you're a patron at our library, you should be able to grab a book and prop yourself up near the fireplace and get warmed up when it's cold, and you know what I'm saying. So I think that ownership is really important. Citizen is tricky. Because I don't know what exactly you mean by that. I don't know if you mean a Novi citizen. I don't know if you mean a citizen of America. I don't know what you mean. So I think we want to watch language there too, especially in writing. So I just wanted to throw that out there too, and also get some clarification on what you meant by that. And then really quick, I'll just nail the points here. I won't go too long. But for freedom to read, I think it is important to put into the record so it goes in the minutes. Number one is that in the public interest for publishers and librarians to make available the widest diversity of views and expressions, including those that are unorthodox, unpopular, or considered dangerous by the majority. And it has more writing under that, but I'm not going to read that part. I'm just going to read the tops.
Okay, where are you reading?
I'm reading the freedom to read statement points, because that was something that you had in play. So I would like to speak to that.
Actually, if I could, not to interrupt.
I'd like to finish, please.
Well, I think this is-
Publishers, librarians, and
She's got the
booksellers
floor
do
right
not need to endorse every idea or presentation they make available. It would conflict with the public interest for them to establish their own political, moral, or aesthetic views as a standard for determining what should be published or circulated. 3, it is contrary to the public interest for publishers or librarians to bar access to writings on the basis of the personal history or political affiliations of the author. 4, there is no place in our society for efforts to coerce the taste of others, to confine adults to the reading matter deemed suitable for adolescents, or to inhibit the efforts of writers to achieve artistic expression. 5, it is not in the public interest to force a reader to accept the prejudgment of a label characterizing any expression or its author as subversive or dangerous. 6, it is the responsibility of publishers and librarians as guardians of the people's freedom to read to contest encroachments upon that freedom by individuals or groups seeking to impose their own standards or tastes upon the community at large, and by the government whenever it seeks to reduce or deny public access to public information. And then lastly, it has 7, it is the responsibility of publishers and librarians to give full meaning to the freedom to read by providing books that enrich the quality and diversity of thought and expression. By the exercise of this affirmative responsibility, they can demonstrate that the answer to a bad book is a good one, that the answer to a bad idea is a good one. So that's the nuts and bolts of the freedom to read. I think that's important because people are going to hear this and they may not know what it says. The Library Bill of Rights that is here from the ALA is much quicker, and it just says, the American Library Association affirms that all libraries are forums for information ideas, that the following basic policies should guide their services. Books and other library resources should be provided for the interest, information, and enlightenment of all people of the community the library serves. Materials should not be excluded because of the origin, background, or views of those contributing to their creation. Libraries should provide materials and information presenting all points of view on current and historical issues. Materials should not be proscribed or removed because of partisan or doctrinal disapproval. Libraries should challenge censorship in the fulfillment of their responsibility to provide information and enlightenment. Libraries should cooperate with all persons, groups concerned with resisting abridgment of free expression and free access to ideas. A person's right to use a library should not be denied or abridged because of origin, age, background, or views. Libraries which make exhibit spaces and meeting rooms available to the public they serve should make such facilities available on an equitable basis, regardless of the beliefs or affiliations of individuals or groups requesting their use. And then lastly, all people, regardless of origin, age, background, or views, possess a right to privacy and confidentiality in their library use. Libraries should advocate for, educate about, and protect people's privacy, safeguarding all library use data, including personally identifiable information. So, I think that that's helpful to kind of know what we're talking about when we talk about the ALA Bill of Rights, because this is in all of those policies that I looked up, and the Freedom to Read statement. They're very important. So that is my soapbox, and I am hopping off.
Okay, so
Okay.
if I could just respond to a couple
Okay.
clarifications. So, one, all the things that you're concerned about in item number 3, the things that are in quotes, that's a quote of the current president. The label applied to the current president is applied by herself, and if you click on the hyperlink, if you prefer, I can boulderize it by putting a bit.ly or one of those shortcut hyperlinks. That's the hyperlink to the article. That article is full of all her quotes and her statements. The ALA, okay, it's nice that they say all these things, right? The ALA just canceled Laura Ingalls Wilder. Yes, Little House on the Prairie is an offensive book, okay? The award that's been named after her, awarded for, I believe, over closing in on 80, 90 years, was recently eliminated. So this is an organization that's well outside the mainstream. I'm sorry. This organization does not believe in internet filters, even for children. They do not believe age-appropriate elements of books. When you have a youth section, you violate ALA policy, okay? That's actually what they say on their site. So, yes, I reserve the right to question the ALA. I'm sure they do some good work. They also have some ideas that are well outside of what I believe a library should be. As a trustee, I reserve my right to ask the rest of my trustees to reconsider that. And again, my number one thing is anywhere we have blanket endorsements of their stuff, that's us being lazy. They got a great work product, let's talk about it. Let's look through their Bill of Rights and let's see what it says. But all that stuff, if you're gonna put computers without internet filters, guess what? I'm not gonna be voting for computers in the library. I know what the internet is, okay? I'm an IT manager too, so it's like, there's crap out there. So that's where I'm at that. There is no conflict between saying that the workers at the library report to the citizens of Novi versus being open to books from outside the community. We already are, that's why our collection's so big. There's not that many authors in Novi. I simply said the local section could be a little broader, and I left that discretion to them. That's all I'm suggesting. So there's no conflict there. So when we read, we need to make sure we understand the holistic of what's being raised here and not to dive into tiny semantics here. Thank you.
Okay, you know what I really appreciate is the fact that you really have all put a lot of thought into it. I mean, this is good discussion. I know it's time consuming, and maybe it takes up a lot of time on our agenda. However, I think it's good, and the fact that this policy is going back to committees, policy and DEI, to discuss and to add or subtract or whatever, and then bring a recommendation back to the board for however long it takes and discuss them. But I personally respect the committee responsibility of bringing things back to the board, because we've had a thorough discussion here, and now it will go to those committees who will come to us with a recommendation. And if there's still discussion that needs to be taking place, then we'll bring that up at that time. Yes, Member Dooley.
Just really quick, for the rest of the board, through the chair, when it comes to Trustee Sherry-Curry's concern about, who's evaluating and where does the buck stop, according to number 5 in his email, one thing that I want our committee and policy committee, if you would consider this, is having one individual be the end-all be-all decider of whether or not something should be in the affirmative of a reconsideration or, not, I think is setting us up for some danger there, because you need to have actually people from different backgrounds who are trained in the library sciences, not just the director. She needs to lean on her professional staff, so we need to have multiple opinions, and there actually is a process that goes through that's pretty extensive when something's reconsidered. So I just wanted my trustees to kind of have that food for thought when you're thinking about that specific point, that it shouldn't just be one person. It will be her and her staff. And I agree that sentence should be eliminated. That's just something to consider.
If I could
Member Sherry-Curry.
if I could clarify, the section I was referring to is about responsibility for selection. It's not about the request for reconsideration. Those are two separate areas,
It's-
policy areas.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that clarification. I still think that each of her librarians have very specific expertise in information collection, business collection, international, and what have you. They're the ones that are going to be studying and feeding our collections. It should just not be unilaterally done by the head of the organization. And I think Julie's done an excellent job empowering her staff to do this because this is her profession and their profession. So I just want all the trustees to consider that. Thank you.
Okay, and I'm sure this lively discussion will continue in committees and everything, and anyway, appreciate everybody's comments. Thank you. Anybody else have anything to add? Okay, moving along then, we will, where are we? Okay, here. Now for our action item. We had a robust discussion last month relating to the first draft of the food policy, but no action was taken last month. So now we're looking at the second draft, and I'll entertain a motion to approve the second draft. Is there a motion?
I would move to approve the policy in our presentation for the food policy.
Okay, Member Stirring has made the motion, and second is made over here by.
I will second.
I was thinking right on the end of the table.
Oh, did
here.
you? You didn't say something.
Member Bartlett, he never
You
gets
need
to
to
speak
say
up.
something.
You've got to get his name in here sometimes. Member Bartlett. Okay, now, discussion about the food policy.
I'll
Yes.
speak on behalf of the policy committee. We met on October 21 to discuss the food policy. We made some, what I would call some, technical corrections. But the primary change that we made was to allow for the exceptions in the food policy if presented to the library organization by another organization such as the Friends. So for example, if you wanted to have food on the second floor in connection with an event, a Friends event or a library event, that would now be permitted in this policy. That was really the major change that we made from the last month's.
Okay. And not anything else. That's pretty much it. Yes. Director
I'd also
Hart.
like to add that through our conversation, when you look at the policy currently, it has the word handicap, which we'd like to change to accessible instead.
Okay. Good. I like that.
Yes.
Okay.
I just wanted to thank the policy committee for your work on this because I think the questions that you brought up last month, I was ready to vote for it.
I was too.
But then you're like, wait. Let's
Yeah.
rethink this, which we have the right to do. And I really appreciate the work that you did because this is definitely more comprehensive and fair.
Yes.
And really does address a lot of the things that you brought up. So I'm excited to vote yes on this.
Okay. Member Mishner.
Yeah, I was going to say, and I think part of that too is because we didn't really get to, as a committee, get to see it. So when we were able to sit down, we took like 25 minutes, right? It was the fastest but most productive meeting. And Brian even sent us a joke afterwards. So it was fun. But I think it was such a productive meeting, and I think that the things that are changed are good and will be helpful with the disruptions that have happened, because that has to be really hard. I think that what I appreciate is that there was an understanding of empathy for people that are hungry and that are at the library and need to study or work or whatever. But there's also an understanding that our staff also, or us if we're at the library, need to also get things done too. So I think it was a happy middle meet and a good consensus.
Anyone else? Okay. I appreciate all the independent thinkers on this, because I, like you, Member Dooley, I was thinking, I could vote on this, but then the questions that were brought up from that side of the table made me start to think about, I'm all about the food, right? I'm all about it. But, I appreciate the questions that were brought up. So, good work, everybody. Good work.
Thank you.
I'll ask if there are no other questions, and we've had good discussion here. I'll ask Mr. Secretary to call the roll.
Trustee Stirring?
Yes.
Trustee Bartlett votes yes. Trustee Crawford?
Yes.
Trustee Cherukuri?
Yes.
Trustee Dooley?
Yes.
Trustee Mitchell?
Yes.
Motion passes 6-0.
Okay, very good. You've all seen the communications, and I'm quite sure you're going to adhere to the future events calendar. You're going to look at that all the time and everything. And once again, we're not making a motion to adjourn into closed session. We are going to make a motion to adjourn. Who's going to make that motion? Member Misher. She seems pretty anxious about it.
Motion
Okay,
to
member-
adjourn.
Okay, and we're going to look over here to Member Chair Curry. You want to make a motion in a second, right? Okay, any discussion about adjourning? No? Okay, Member Bartlett, please call the roll.
Trustee Chair Curry?
Yes.
Trustee Crawford?
Yes.
Trustee Dooley?
Yes.
Trustee Mitchner?
Yes.
Trustee Stirring?
Yes.
Trustee Bartlett votes yes, we're adjourned.